The delightful, pretty person up here is Olivia Stomski, who is the director of the Newhouse Sports Media Center. I'll tell you about that. And she is on what they call a sports media and communication track. In schools, they call these curriculums tracks.
That's right.
Basically, within the school it's called a track, within the outside it's called a curriculum. And a professor of practice. Professor of practice is a little bit of a jump to almost a little bit higher than professor, not quite to dean, but professor of practice, the way I get it, is that's what they're committed to in the practice.
Well, I'm the director of the Sports Media Center and the director of the Sports Media Communication track. Professor of practice means I still work in the industry. So not only am I a professor, but I also still produce and direct for ESPN.
She also produces for, she's a producer and editor, and she's also with a firm called Pro Angle Media, of which she is the coordinating producer. Olivia oversees the content and the production of 200 plus remote event productions that Pro Age Media is responsible for each year. As an aside, somebody who's kind of been into it, think about this. Every week they have a different stage. Every week that truck or that trailer has to go to a different stage. When you go see the Stephen Colbert show, he's at the same place every week over there on 7th Avenue, every day. They don't have to fuss with moving the cameras around and all the other, getting camera angles and seeing this and get out of this elevator and the whole Michigas. Serious.
Yeah.
I understand it. You got to worry about those things, okay? And they have to worry about content too. Hope you guys understand what content is. Mark Larson is a Wisconsin native who made his way to Central New York in 2003 and has been a part of our community longer than he lived anywhere else in his life. For Mark, it doesn't get much better than a dinosaur barbecue, the pizza store across the street. Have you been to the pizza store across the street from the dinosaur?
A pizza.
A pizza?
Now, yeah.
You've been there?
Yeah.
Dynamite.
Dynamite.
Yes, it
Agreed.
Same owner.
He's a partner. He's a partner with Paulie.
All right.
Okay, and
Same owner.
what do I know about these?
They've got it figured out.
Oh, they've got it figured out.
Yeah.
I said to Paulie, when are you going to open up another store? We don't want to open up another store. We can't control the consistency and the quality. I don't know about that. If you want a Dynamite pizza, how close?
What's the name of the salad too?
Pardon me?
It's a good salad too.
Yeah.
It's called a pizza regionale. So the word pizza with an A in front of it, and then regionale. But you know what, Pasquale's in Fayetteville is good. I mean, if you don't want to go all the way downtown.
You mean the one here on...
Pasquale's in Fayetteville, just take Manlius Fayetteville
little
Manlius
square.
Road. Over by Dunkin' Donuts in Fayetteville.
In the little
That
square
little
there.
square, yeah.
Well,
Pasquale's.
there's a kid who started this place. He's got calls himself Ironwood.
Oh,
Oh, yeah, that's good.
Ironwood is...
Like in Italy.
Well, it's a wood-fired oven, okay, rather than a gas, whatever, okay.
And it's a thin crust too, like.
Yeah, it's
spaghetti
excellent. But the pizza down to this other place is very good. And burnt dairy chocolate milk. I'm sure
We
you
could
guys...
just talk about pizza.
Yeah. That would be good with that.
And they got 7 or 8 good choices that you can... And there's always jam. Yep. Mark has been with Spectrum News since it was launched in November 2003. Spectrum is really the old Time Warner. And the guys from Charter bought Time Warner, And they've made that station or that a much more hipper, easier to watch operation. Unfortunately, they're having what is known as where you chop off the, what do they call that? You don't want to use the word.
Cutting the cord.
Cutting the cord.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of life. Mark takes a lot of pride in the Spectrum News High School football show entitled First and 10, which is 15 seasons strong and has made multiple awards. High school football in this country is under the radar thing, especially,
Depends on where you are, though. Texas. Definitely not under the radar. Living by that.
And even on upstate New York, and even in Syracuse, you guys are spending a lot of time, and your competitors are having a lot of time doing it. Well, it's because parents want to see their kids.
Well, because I think in each, especially in the smaller communities, like in Camastota or whatever, like the entire town
Is involved.
comes out for the game on Friday night.
Well,
Whether they have kids or grandkids or maybe nobody they're related to, just come out.
And these kids are pretty good. It's amazing how fast they mature. And let's see, he's been fortunate enough to have covered 3 Final Four games. I assume all of you know what a Final Four is. You don't know what a Final Four is?
Sure, of course I know it.
You do, but the lady behind. A Final Four,
Thank you.
tell me if I'm...
You don't believe me.
Final Four is the NCAA's elimination tournament for after 64 teams have rattled each other's bones.
Basketball.
Basketball, and it's usually the first weekend in April.
There's 4 teams left. It's the national semifinals, so there's 4 teams. Those 4 teams play against each other, then the winners of those 2 semifinal games play in the championship. So they have all of that happen in one weekend at one location.
And it happens in 3 weekends from the
whole tournament?
The whole tournament, from the jump.
Or all the way down.
Right, they cut it. The NCAA, for some reason, did something right here.
It's definitely the best thing they do.
yeah. It's the best 3 weeks of
Yeah.
the year.
For sure.
Oh yeah, and they make a lot of money. I don't know what CBS pays for those rights, but it must be
400 billion or million?
something. They pay a lot of money.
Yeah.
Final Four games, including Syracuse's Cinderella run in 2016, which are memories he'll hold on forever, and so will a lot of us. I remember when Syracuse won in 79. Was that the year they won with Carmelo?
That was 2003,
2000.
just
okay.
before I came here. Just missed it.
Got to see the ruckus that's going on there. If you have Spectrum and catch the sport news, you'll know Mark. A spectacular October sports day welcome to our guests. Of course, the traffic. Let's start off with any old subject you want to start off at. I don't care. You want to start off with what it costs to get the rights to the NFL?
Well, the NFL does things differently when it comes to rights. So in most of the other leagues, the teams hold the rights to where their games are aired. The NFL is different. The NFL first chooses what teams will be Monday Night Football. So that comes right off the board, decided by the NFL with the team, without having the team's input at all. After the Monday Night Football games have been chosen by the NFL, then the teams have the rights to the rest of their games.
Do they have their own networks too, where they get that money, but all the money goes to the NFL, and then the NFL distributes the bucks? Is that how it works?
For Monday Night Football.
For all, even Monday night and Sunday game, and well, there's Thursday games too.
Thursday game. So the ones that are branded that are NFL games of the week. So the Thursday and the Sundays, those are decided by the NFL. The NFL controls that money and distributes based on the teams and the airing. After that, the rest of the season, those rights are decided by the team itself. And they don't have their own networks as far as, I mean, they have their rights. One network owns them, and then it's distributed per team.
During this conversation leading up to this, I spoke to a friend of mine who's in California, who's a very astute guy. He says sooner or later the NFL is going to have a tier league, i.e. no different than soccer has in Europe. I don't know how it's going to relate to the media, but if that happens, it's going to have some bearing on the money that's, okay, that's what but he said it's going to need a tier. If you go back the last 20 years, there are teams that have not made even close to the playoffs. And that lower tier is going to have their own league.
Tiered like the various classes of college football or other
tiers.
sports?
Just
Yeah.
they're going to be in their own league. I think that's what it means. A tier would be their own league or so. But they would get some money from the second and first tier to support them. But the Patriots are going to play the Cardinals. The Cardinals are very good. There's no enrichment to the play, to the audience, the television audience. The television audience is based on the quality of the teams that are playing that night.
I don't know. I mean, Mark, what do you think about that? I don't know that that's the case.
I mean, with the NFL, I feel like whether the team is winning or like the Bills have been, they didn't make the playoffs for how many, 16, 18 years
Right.
straight or something, and they still sold out every single game.
Right. Yeah.
I have a question. If I recall correctly, within the last year or so, our president announced that the NFL was on the decline because of the kneeling controversy. Two separate issues, but are you seeing any kind of decline? I don't see it.
Yeah, not that I've seen it. And the NFL, I think, is, and there's so much debate over the commissioner and some of the missteps that he made, but they just seem to just keep going and going stronger and stronger.
They're rock solid.
Yeah.
Right. I think you bring up a great question. Did the NFL lose some viewers because of the kneeling? Sure, but did we notice it? Was it just a penny out of a huge jar?
Well, that's Miami.
Yeah. I mean, I think that the NFL has a lot of issues that they're facing down, none of which is one that's going to cause that many concern.
Right.
Whether it's the kneeling, whether it's issues with the commissioner, whether it's domestic violence, whether it's there's all of these issues that happen within the NFL as a whole. But they're still printing money. They're still packing the house. So I just don't see a concern. And even, the discussions with CTE and the concussion, I mean, yes, but it's a business and it's a fan base that doesn't seem to budge.
If you want to get a hotel room, where's the Super Bowl? You played in Atlanta, I think?
That I don't know.
You cannot get a hotel room for the week.
Yeah.
What does that mean? That means the hotel's got that deposit money sitting there. Okay, the NFL has got that money sitting in the bank already, the tickets sold.
And they're talking about expanding the regular season, not shrinking it. So there's certainly,
I mean, to 18 games?
yeah,
Yeah, I saw something like
get
that.
rid of some of the preseason.
Yes. Excuse me for saying this, but it's a business. Pardon me?
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's dead on.
you're correct.
It's a business. And once you understand that it's a business, then you understand the NFL is just not a business. College hoops are a business. College football is a business. What is the question?
My point is, does that mean that it's leading towards they should be paid?
Well,
It makes it difficult.
it's starting to touch on it with that California deal. Not that-
Yeah, there's a lot there,
Yeah.
for sure.
That's a conversation I think everybody in the industry has had for 20 years. and you can convince most of us either way. Should college athletes be paid? Well, colleges are making a lot of money off of 18-year-old kids, men and women. You look at a college athlete's schedule, and even for the Olympic sports, they have practice every day. They have no free time. They don't have the time to have an outside job. Meanwhile, people are buying their jerseys and showing up to their games and eating hot dogs and drinking beers, all because of the young people on the field or on the court. With California changing their rule as far as paying student athletes, what kind of effect that will have on the NCAA will be interesting to see.
I think you need a little update. California has passed, or the governor has signed, I'm pretty sure, he signed a passage where college athletes can be paid for their signature and their jersey, selling the jerseys with their name on it. Isn't that?
Well, they're like this. They would be able to do endorsements. They would be able to make money based on their own image. And this is male and female athletes alike. It wouldn't start until 2023. So it's basically forced the NCAA to figure out how they want to navigate this whole topic on how to compensate athletes, especially the revenue-producing sports, college football, college basketball, men's basketball in most universities, sometimes women's, but which sports produce revenue and how to fairly compensate those players for that revenue.
And hold on, and who to compensate?
Yeah.
You're going to compensate a swimmer or a basketball player? You're going to compensate a lacrosse player or a quarterback? Okay, go on, Eleanor.
When you talk about remuneration for sports people who are supposedly coming to study at the university, what obligations do they have to the university? Because money's being spent for their academics,
True.
as well as their room and board, as well as any uniforms and travel and all that sort of thing. How does that compare with a minor sport, swimming, tennis, women's hockey,
Field hockey, the whole
ice hockey, and yet these people who are in football, basketball, maybe baseball, will get these huge, or may get sums. Would they be put into trust funds as the children's monies that were earned by the movie people in the 30s, 40s, and 50s that the children could not get at? Their adult family members could not get at it. That it was put into trust and only got given at a certain age.
Not paid
I mean, that-
immediately, but paid.
I know it's
down the road.
it goes together in the fact that most universities have more than one sport. And I know East Coast is bigger in lacrosse, and particularly up here, than you will find in New Mexico.
Yeah. But it's also important to realize that every college athlete isn't compensated
Right.
the same. College football players and basketball players at the Division I level, it's a full ride. Everything is paid for.
Right, and that's, how
And a
fair
college
is
swimmer,
that?
a college swimmer might get a few $1,000s.
You might get a quarter scholarship.
Yeah, or not even, it's just something. Even lacrosse, those are rarely full scholarships.
And they will probably have to pay for
There's
for
15
their
scholarships, I
academics.
think, for an entire lacrosse team, 80 kids or whatever it is,
Right.
15 scholarships divided up. So how do you compensate that? You can't compensate them all the same. You can't, I don't think.
Well, they're already not compensated the same.
They're already-
So if
right.
you've got a team of 80 young men and there's 15, how many of those do you break up into partial and how much partial? So
Right.
that so that now you have 40 of them so they're only getting a small amount of.
Regardless of what they're getting a free ride.
They're not.
Not all of them.
That's
No,
all free ride.
They're not.
No.
So for football and basketball, the majority of them are getting what you're calling a free ride.
Right.
Which is tuition, their housing, food, right? But All other sports do not have that.
Right, this
So-
is what I'm trying to say. How would you equalize?
Well, you can't. You can't because
That-
football but it comes down just as we started, it comes down to money. So how much money is made in the Dome on a Saturday compared to how much money is made at the soccer field on a Tuesday? Well, we're talking about $20 versus 80,000.
Right.
So of course, the team that makes 80,000 is getting a lot more. You're never going to make them equal, and it's impossible to do that. The attempt with Title IX to at least make the sexes equal as far as how much money you're spending in each still is making a headache.
Olivia, I think just for the sake of a review,
I would love it if we could.
to explain Title IX.
So Title IX is a mandate that universities have the same amount of funding for women's teams as they do for men's teams. So for an example, if we add one men's team, say, people say the reason SU does not have a baseball team is because of Title IX. If you add one men's baseball team, you're looking at adding most likely at least two female teams to what we need to do. So that with that law in place, the athletic department is constantly looking to make sure that the funding for both men's and women's sports is equal.
Is equal.
Is football exempt?
Nothing is exempt, but that's why we have a softball team, that's why we have a women's hockey team, we don't have a men's hockey team, we don't have a baseball team. So, because football is this big weight.
Does all that money stay only within the purview of the sports department?
The athletics department, yes.
Department, yeah.
So nothing goes to the academic end of the university?
The school does not stick their fingers into that college money.
I would think that if you have the baseball
And,
players
football.
and the basketball, not the baseball, the basketball and the football players getting, quote, a free ride, the monies that are earned on the field for the games should go into a fund to pay for that. And
And they do, actually. So the athletics department, with the money that they are
Right.
making, they do owe the university a certain amount. So that money does filter back through the university. It doesn't first go to them and then, it's not,
Because I'm sure some of them will need more tutoring and some.
yeah.
some
Well,
of
the-
them will-
The tutors actually work for the athletics department.
Pardon me?
The tutors
Yeah.
work for the athletics department
And are paid by the
Yes.
and
athletic.
paid by the athletics department.
So they're not not part of the academic?
Correct. Yeah. They're not faculty members, they're not.
Let's jump to another subject.
Well, it's interesting.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how much the football uniforms cost versus the bathing suits versus the soccer
Don't cost
and
anything.
lacrosse team uniforms. I mean,
Yeah, call Nike.
sometimes the monies have to be equalized.
Eleanor, it costs a fortune to send a college football team somewhere.
Of course.
I mean, they gotta send a couple of tractor trailers there with the equipment and on the whole Gonzo
They probably
McGill.
hire a plane.
Well, hire,
Yeah.
they hire.
They have a charter.
They have a charter, but just to take the football players and the families and that stuff. That's a-
Imagine getting on that plane. There'd be one civilian and all football players, you know.
And the coaches don't go with them?
The coaches do.
Yeah,
Well,
they have
coaches'
their own
wives go with
charter.
them too.
Yeah, they have their own
They have
charter.
a charter jet. Yeah. They don't just go to the airport and go to these.
Or they don't go with the
They have a
players?
charter jet.
Yeah, do they go on their own?
Yeah, it's one large charter plane that has the coaches, the players, some media,
Some boosters.
some boosters, all on one single
But
plane.
wait a
that
minute.
The university.
I
athletics
understand the
owns.
boosters have to pay to go on
They
that.
pay for their own flight?
Yeah, the boosters pay to go on that.
probably.
But
Is that a standard ticket, or would that be through the university would get a break? Because they will divide up the number of people on a plane and
Yeah, the
figure out
university's
what.
chartering it, so they would probably pay the university for that, but yeah, I've had a chance to go on some of those planes before, and they're not like your standard flight. Yeah, you get on and you've got a sack lunch sitting in your seat with Gatorades in the seat pocket in front of you, and then they're bringing around food constantly.
Wow,
To feed these
elegant.
big baskets of ice cream sandwiches or whatever. I mean, it's, yeah. And
It's
this
a
was like
picnic.
an hour and a half flight. I mean, I was stuffed by the time I got off. So, I think everybody thinks that because of all the money that the NCAA is generating through the NCAA basketball tournament, through the college football, the BCS, the bowl games, all that the athletes should be compensated. But California is all of a sudden creating their own bill.
They figured it out.
Well, there are other states that are talking about it.
Yeah.
I guess Florida wants to get one on the books by 2020. California is not going to take effect until 2023, but it's forcing the NCAA to figure it out. But think about all the problems it could create when you have a kid that wants to go to college, and Syracuse wants him, and UCLA wants him, and UCLA says, well, hey, come out here, we're going to give you a Porsche, you're going to do a sponsorship, a commercial for a Porsche dealership, and we'll give you a car. And what can Syracuse offer you? Well, at this point, nothing. New York is also thinking about some sort of law to compensate athletes, and then the kid goes to California, has his Porsche. Well, now the guys in the locker room that are on the same team as him, some of the guys that are blocking for him aren't getting anything. Are they going to want to block for this hotshot with his Porsche? And he's not even very good. He doesn't work hard in practice. So why should I block for this guy? So now you're creating. I mean, there's so many problems it's going to create. So I don't know how you figure out how to.
It would be
evenly,
very difficult.
You know.
Well, I'll tell you what, it'll keep people talking about it, it'll keep writers talking about it, everybody's going to be talking about this sooner or later. As soon as this thing starts to spread out, right now it's this news about California students getting paid.
Just past last week.
Yeah, it's in the growing stages, but 2022, you're going to hear about it. Okay? And it's going to be, but let's switch to another subject.
Okay.
Let's talk about how much money, why is this thing always about money? How much money the television people are paying the leagues for rights. Do you understand how that thing works? You want to explain it, Alex? This is how I get it. The NBC says, we'll bid $3 billion for the rights for 2 years. And CBS says, we'll give you 4.1. And Turner says, we'll give you 4.4. So they pay them that money in some way. Now, the league got that money, or the conference has got that money. What do they do with that money?
Hey, Mark.
What's that?
A little bit.
Hey, you.
Yeah, a little bit of that.
Throwing ideas out, then sure.
But you understand the trail here? So the schools get X amount of dollars. Syracuse University's take from the ACC is a generous amount.
Substantial.
Yes.
Yeah, that's good.
A substantial, generous amount. Now, there's 15 teams in the ACC.
Yes. 14 for football.
And then Notre Dame.
Yeah.
Notre Dame's got their own deal. Okay, so now, those 14 schools split that $2 billion. What do the schools do with that money? Do they go like Harvard does and say, we're going to give X amount of free scholarships? And they're in a third level sports conference called the Ivy League, which doesn't get any real money. So how does that money, remember what I said in the beginning, it's a business, and business is money. How does that money get split up? And how much does the athletic, the commissioner of the ACC make? How much money does the athletic director at Notre Dame make, or the athletic director at Syracuse University make? All because of that original fees. Right? That's where that money comes from.
I don't know how it gets split up, to be honest.
Nobody does.
Yeah.
It's a secret.
Well, and it's different at every university.
Naturally.
Yeah.
But there is money hanging in there to get split up.
But that's probably where the facilities come from, and I mean, each school has to figure out what to do. Each school gets a chunk, and then they have to figure out what to do with it.
That's another. Schools that go to recruit high schoolers bring the student here so they can see the physical facilities, what the training looks like, what the practice field looks like. And that determines somewhat of where that student is going to go play basketball or football. Am I right?
Oh, yeah.
That money that is spent to embellish that facility, that is all done to enhance the recruiting trail for recruiting purposes.
Well, I mean, and that's at every university. So take University of Oregon, for an example, which is right around the corner from where Nike headquarters are in Beaverton, and is very much supported by Nike. You get near campus, and it's Nike everything, and it's beautiful, and it's flashy, and I want to go there. There's big O's everywhere, and the colors are bright, and it's exciting, and if I'm 17 years old, and I have people saying, here's all these neat things, and I walk into a locker room with 18 TVs and lazy boys and big bowls of snacks and everything. I mean, I would want to go there now, and I'm 40, so I'm thinking at 17 I would have thought, and so it works. I mean, of course, a lot of money.
Especially when the place you went to the previous weekend
right,
had none of that.
had none of that.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
This is for the professor, but of all the D1 players,
Yeah.
the number that go on to pro careers is infinitesimal. What does the university do for those students
You
who,
know,
let's face it, aren't going to have sports careers when they leave? Are they equipped to do anything?
You ask a great question. I worked with a man who used to believe, or still does, that the university should actually allow athletes to major in being a professional athlete. So they're taught how to manage their money, they're taught how to manage their brand and their personality and all of this. The issue is you're right, it's a very small amount, very small number of student athletes, NCAA athletes, who go on to play pro in whatever their sport happens to be. Are they prepared for it? I think the Olympic athletes are a little more prepared for it because they go in knowing that that's probably not their future. The underserved students are going to be your basketball and football players because that is a sport that there is so much hope of going into the pros. I'd love to sit up here and tell you, yeah, they're prepared for the real world and have a ton of other skills. I wouldn't feel like I'm being completely honest with you, because if you look at the schedules for some of these athletes, how much time are they spending in the classroom and you know, looking at other things? Many of these athletes go on to coach their sport. Many of these athletes go on to still be a part of the sport itself, which is helpful for them. But as far as there being a specific program for our student athletes that states and prepares them for what if you don't get drafted to the NFL, there's not. Most sports, especially at SU, scholarships are 5-year. So what that means is that when their 4 years are over, SU will allow you to come back to get your master's, which is a 1-year program. Within that scholarship. And I think that that's our answer at this moment is, I have several athletes in our master's program, Julian Wiggum, who played on the football team, went to the NFL, went to training camps, came back and got his master's because he had that extra year. I think that's our answer now. Should we be doing more across the board at every university? We should be doing more.
I would also throw it back on them, though.
Yeah.
They are, some of them, getting a free education. And so, you look at some of the athletes that come out, like Don McPherson, one of the greatest college football players that would ever. He would succeed in whatever he wanted to do because he's motivated, he's, and so a lot of these kids if you're coming here and everything is paid for you, and then you go through your 4 years and you try to get to the NFL or whatever, and it doesn't work out, and then you're complaining, well, you had your time to, you're going to get it out of it what you put into it. So I would throw it right back at them. If they leave early for the NBA and it doesn't work out, that was kind of their decision.
Right. That's right.
So
They can come back, but they can't play ball there.
Right.
Once you go into a professional league, you can come back to the school to learn, but you cannot play for them.
Can they use the remains of the scholarship?
And once they give that up,
They
they
give that
become
up.
ineligible.
Yeah.
Are they restricted in the choice of the masters to an athletic related?
No,
Okay.
no, that's a great question. No, they can get their masters in anything.
And if it's 2-year masters, then they fork over for the second year?
Let me address one other subject, please, Tom. Getting a degree from the Newhouse School is a great passage to the media in general. The Newhouse School has got a brand that is almost unequaled for journalism in this country and probably the world. That's my selfish.
Oh, there's no doubt.
I would say not almost unequaled, I would say it is unequaled. I did my undergrad at Newhouse and I've never looked for a job. I've gone from one job to another because the next company came and paid me more.
And once your resume says Newhouse, eyes brighten up.
Yeah,
Okay, just the way, because say Fordham, which is a great journalism school, I think,
it is.
and Northwestern is an excellent
Yeah.
school, and I think Northeastern has got some good things, but let's talk about something else. Let's talk about the injuries that prevail in sports in general. Some of these injuries are life-enduring, and they impact your own health, their own health. You could make all the money in the world, but if you got a knee that's going to bother you every day of the week because you got hit on a football field, how is it worth it?
Some of them are life-limiting.
Pardon me?
Some of them are life-limiting.
They are dead on, are they? Okay, they are limiting, that's a better word.
But isn't that personal?
Yes.
Sure it is.
Oh, yeah.
Well, and you can't, I don't think anybody in this room can answer that question. I work with an analyst who played football in the NFL and he can't make it up 4 stairs because of and he says all the time, Mama, don't let your boys grow up to play football, and makes that joke. But he also made a lot of money in a short amount of time, had a lot of fame. His kids can go to college for free. So is it worth it? Well, it's a personal choice every day. So some people choose to climb mountains with no strings attached. I don't think that's worth it, but so I don't think we can answer that question. Not only are we talking about injuries being life-limiting, but they could be life-threatening at some points with some. So we all make that decision, and I think that when we're talking about college, it's a little different than when we're talking about the pros. When we talk about professional athletes, these are adults who sign a contract and know the risks, and so to them the answer is yes.
And I'm sure you've read, I forgot the person's name, he was playing for the Patriots, and he told him to stick it. Told him I'm not going to come back because he couldn't take the injuries, and he saw it as a detriment to his future well-being.
Oh, the Colts, Andrew Luck?
Yeah.
Colts quarterback, Andrew Luck. Yep.
So there are people that sometimes common sense sets in. Now, do you want to talk about naming of the arenas?
Well, the person you're talking about has multi-million dollars in the bank, Andrew Luck.
Yes.
Booked a lot of.
Well, the scary thing about.
So he made probably a logical business decision about his future and ticked off a lot of fans and by that decision. And he had a slew of injuries that were serious injuries and just, But some of us are old enough to remember pre-television, it's always been the big time sports have always been a business, but nowhere near to the extent that they are now, what's evolved as a result of the television revenue. So I have this distant recollection, Lewis just talked about the Ivy League being a third-rate conference, probably is now.
It's not a third-rate conference.
But back in the day when I was a Dartmouth, I had a roommate who was who was quarterback of his high school football team, a kicker, and managed to, because at the time, Dartmouth had an incredibly good team, he became Ivy League scoring leader just as a consequence of kicking. But the point of what I was going to try to say is that, and I don't know if this happens now, they didn't even have freshman dorms. They took, in the admissions process, they mixed all the kids who were admitted in dormitories amongst upperclassmen, and they didn't have athletic dorms. They didn't segregate student athletes as occurs now, where you have football, basketball players living with each other, basically away from the rest of the student body, who they might bump into in a class, but there's this major separation, and so the reason some of us have some ambivalence about what's evolved is that both in college sports and professional sports, money was not the overwhelming driving force. And even in professional sports, the Syracuse Nationals, when they were here, those guys had to have off-season jobs to, nobody got paid much of anything. So everything is now radically changed, almost exclusively as a consequence of the enormous amount of money generated by television revenue. And so for some of us, it creates a little ambivalence about the whole situation.
Before we go into the naming, let me address that issue. The justification of the fees that the TV entities are paying is because they can guarantee eyeballs.
Because they can what?
Guarantee eyeballs.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, unless you're a sponsor, you're General Motors, they say, what's your audience? 3 million on a Saturday afternoon. Oh, we're interested. But the other guy, he's only got 2 million viewers. The rate is lower because they pay. You pay by eyeballs.
Well, in
That's what I
2018, the top 100 live events watched on television, we're talking across the board, 87 of them were sporting events of the top 100.
Yes.
So right there.
So it all makes sense from a business standpoint as to what has occurred. And it makes sense from an individual institutional standpoint, like Syracuse University and others that are trying to stay at a level or get to a level of to be competitive and to bring in enough money. And college presidents and chancellors and trustees have to balance these factors. And they may think, well, we're a little uneasy about what's occurring, but we've got pressure from alumni. We need the money to come in to subsidize the minor sports.
Why do you think
So it's all understandable.
they hired John Wildcat?
Well, he knows what he's from ESPN.
I mean, he understood the
He's the
game.
real deal.
Well, he understood the game.
Oh, sure.
And he was connected.
Sure.
Okay, so it was an obvious
It's
buy.
all private
Who you know,
capitalists.
who knows who.
It all makes sense.
That doesn't. Wait a minute. And it's all
Doesn't mean you have to like it, though.
Oh, you gotta like what you're doing. If you don't,
Yeah, but I mean, the whole professional sport, like I grew up an NFL fan, and now I'm all about college sports. And even though college is also business, it's not doesn't feel as much. When I was growing up, NFL players stayed with one team their whole career. Like I could name, give me a number, give me a team, and I could tell you who it is back then. Now they change teams every few years, and there's no loyalties to the money. And I understand it, sure. It doesn't mean I like
you're
it.
playing football and you're gonna $1 million a year. It's a lot of money.
There's also a racial component to the overall situation. In the two major sports, at least in high-level college basketball, it's predominantly an African-American sport. And I don't know what the ratio is in high-level college football, But you have this often strange situation where a lot of wealthy, primarily white people, are watching minorities playing these major sports. Is that a concern? I don't know. Or maybe that's not an accurate characterization.
It's part of the reality, but you're cheering for the school you went to. That's invariably
That's
the
true.
lock. The lock is, I'm going to watch Syracuse, I want to cheer for Syracuse, I want to cheer for Cornell, I want to cheer for Iowa State, I want to cheer for Notre Dame, because that's the school I went to, and that's where my heart is.
And that's why college is great, and professional sports is so much individual now. Like, I'm not cheering for the Browns, I'm cheering for Odell Beckham. Or I'm
So
cheering
one argument for paying, for having some level of compensation for a lot of these kids is they're not all going to make big money at a higher level. And they often come from backgrounds where they don't have a lot of money or any money. And so it makes sense to move some money, because they're part of this organization that's producing all this money for the school.
That reminds me of a story. It's kind of a situation story, but I'm going to tell it to you anyway. There's a story that goes back to guys that say, I want to come back as a Jewish wife. So now, don't give me that look, Anita. Now it is, I want to come back as a professional football player. Okay, it's the way it is.
Top of the ladder.
But let's go to the naming of arenas.
Jim Ringo had 18 knee surgeries. Do you remember him?
I've had 2 and I've never played a little sport. Okay, so, but there is this smell of a story that's going on about the naming of what is known as the Carrier Dome, and of how it is being handled by the athletic department and the athletic director who said, I don't have a rhyme or reason. I'd say it was
Has United Tech weighed in on this?
Pardon me?
Has United Tech weighed in? I haven't heard their...
United Tech hasn't said a word. United Tech is waiting for their name to come down off the front of Irving Avenue. When that happens, then the shit will have to fail. Excuse my language, but that is what happens. Okay? United Tech is saying, university, make the mistake, and then it'll bounce on you. Meanwhile, you're going to keep our name up there, at least there. So you didn't put it in the football guide. You're certainly not going to put it in the basketball guide. Okay? And you're not going to put it on the cups, and you're not going to put it on the napkins, and you're not going to put it on the straws. But sooner or later, that matter is going to get resolved. And exactly how it's going to get resolved and what it's going to take, money.
Is United Technologies
For another 200 years.
is United Technologies willing to negotiate, or are they going to just adopt the position?
Excuse me, I don't think anybody has knocked on United Technologies' door.
I mean, their initial attitude would be, wait a minute, we paid this money, we have this in perpetuity.
Right, we got a contract here.
But do they want to litigate that?
They will if they have to. They got lawyers, they got 6 tons of money waiting to spend on litigation lawyers over there on 7th Avenue and 6th Avenue or wherever to litigate this matter with your lawyers that are also on 6th Avenue and 7th Avenue. And that's what it's going to be. I don't know what you guys thinking, but you're pretty closer, much closer to that story.
Well, yeah, I know John Wildhack has come out and said there was no intention,
No rhyme or reason.
no intention to eliminate the word carrier from Carrier Dome. It was like an innocent mistake, but.
An
I think
innocent
there's-
mistake, he didn't use those words, I'm sure.
Well, I didn't like that, but I think there's a lot going on behind the scenes that will, it'll come out.
And my jerky sense is that Syracuse wants to get this thing over with so that they can sell the naming rights to somebody else They'll even sell it back to Carrier.
Which, it would be ironic if, when they finally install air conditioning in the Carrier Dome, that the Carrier wasn't on the name on the dome. For years, it's been the Carrier Dome with no air conditioning.
That'll be forever after.
In 2022, they're supposedly going to install air conditioning.
But the name Carrier is gonna be over there on Irving Avenue.
Yeah.
And there's people that are gonna be, that will die knowing that it's the Carrier Dome. After they die, it'll be the arena. And there's somebody, one of my jerky friends said, they're gonna call it the Loud House. I wanted to ask him where he was buying that weed. I'm serious. I mean, and I think the Carrier situation with Syracuse is the only one that I know that has a what's the word? Perpetuity.
Professor, you're being quiet.
Yeah, I mean, as far as the naming rights of the dome, it's not really in my wheelhouse. You know, companies change it. It comes down to money. I think fans are going to call it the Carrier Dome no matter whose name is on there for at least the next 30 years. So,
I think I read in the paper where, of course, we call it the Dome here,
yeah.
but for the rest of the country, it's the Carrier Dome.
Right.
Wait a minute, ESPN tells it the Carrier
Dome
Dome.
forever after.
She was one of the first
Don't
ones
just let somebody say, did you say the Dome to somebody out in Minnesota? Is it the Superdome? Is it the whatever dome? I don't know all the names of the domes, but to people in the other parts of the country, it's the Carrier Dome.
Yeah, true.
Yeah, I'm from California, and that's exactly right. Everyone will call it the Carrier Dome, and so, you know.
So Carrier's getting a free ride, even if there's another name on the dome.
At least for a while, right? Yeah. I mean, and that's every arena.
That happens everywhere.
Exactly.
When we bought a new house, it wasn't our house. It was the Massey's house.
Yeah.
Or it was so-and-so's house for years.
Years.
We did that too,
Yeah.
yes.
Right, and it will happen everywhere. I mean, New Mexico, for example, has a great basketball arena. They call it the Pit. It's called the Pit forever. A pizza company called Wise Pies changed the name, 8-9 years ago, and it says, signs everywhere, it says Wise Pies Arena. You couldn't pay the fans to pay it. They're never ever going to call it that, ever. And so that's a lot of money that this company put, and it's going to be called the Pit forever. So will people that are Syracuse fans in Montana and California and New Mexico call it the Carrier Dome for the next 20 years? Yeah. So will they get a free ride? Sure.
Nothing better than a free ride. Wait a minute. I claim free is a wonderful word. Almost as good as cash.
Louis, they paid for it.
Well, when you
Maybe.
we're going to tie this up a little bit here, but is there any other subjects you guys want to address while we're here and knocking it around?
I've got a question about who does the filming and what equipment does SU or the local colleges do versus SBN, NBC, and the rest of them?
At like a football game, or
For the games and who pays for it?
Well, yeah, I mean, the school does have its own,
They do have their own video.
they have
Or
their own
whatever.
video production staff, yep, that puts, and then a lot of the stuff they produce goes on their website. We, of course, in the local media, we have our own cameras and we produce things for our channels. And some of that we can put on our website, and some we can't. Anything ACC
Otherwise,
related, we're not allowed to.
It's all the major.
yeah. So it'll depend. It depends on who has bought the rights to that specific game. So what happens is the company, the network that owns the rights, will take the games that they want, and then they'll sell off piece by piece, like stealing cards, selling it for parts. That's what will happen with every schedule. So ESPN has their certain number of games. Take college football, for an example, and for an ESPN game, you may have 8 cameras.
Do they go through the conferences, or how does that whole thing work?
Yep, and so they go through the conferences, the network works with the conferences, and then once the network buys that, they take which games they want, then the conference will sell off the other games. Fox Sports, which is RSN, Yes Network may come in and do some there, they pay for their own, and every production is gonna look different. So, Fox Sports would be, Yes Network would come in and maybe they'll have 8 cameras and ESPN will have 15 cameras. Just depends on the network.
And now that a lot of the conferences have their own networks, their own TV networks, including the ACC now, there are going to be more and more events that are going to be televised, and fewer events that are going to be available for other networks to come in. That's why, I worked at Time Warner Cable Sports Channel for years, and we did a lot of Syracuse games until the ACC kind of came in and said, those are ours now. We paid a lot of money for the rights, so those are ours.
So you can't.
So we couldn't do them anymore.
So
Don't come here
as
with a
you
camera.
cannot go in with your own staff to film just for your own production and training purposes
You can, and we do, but
without having to pay.
you cannot record the entire game. No, because the rights do not belong to us. So we will have students that will go and shoot a stand-up and use some highlights for educational purposes, but you cannot have a crew of you cannot record the entire game.
You cannot send a crew dedicated just to tape the whole game. Everybody here has to understand today, because of what you see on Dynamite highlights. I don't know what you think, but I think the highlights are Dynamite. Okay, I mean, they're into the pupils of the eyes with some of these guys, and they're just Dynamite. Every camera has a tape recorder. Every camera has a video recorder, either some sort of a digitized recording, and that's how you get these great things that are on 11 o'clock Sports Center, or whatever it's called, and I am kind of surprised that CBS has let ABC deal around them. ABC owns ESPN. They didn't have to go out and do their own sports network. CBS has let this thing slide and not getting their own. Fox, in deference to that, has got their own sports network.
And CBS does now also.
Oh, yeah?
Cable, they don't have many events on there. I think CBS has the Patriot League, maybe. NBC Sports Network shows a lot of hockey.
Okay.
NHL.
But if that's true, then
Not as big as ESPN.
that means they're getting ready to bid for the NFL. They're getting ready to bid for Major League Baseball, getting ready to bid for NBA, and probably getting ready to bid for more hockey.
Yeah.
Although hockey's a pain in the ass to watch on television. I don't know how you can do it. I don't know how somebody can do it.
It's a hard sport to shoot. Yeah, that puck is.
Shoot to watch.
The puck is a blur. Yeah.
I want to go back to something Mark started out with California and their new paying for athletes, and California, New York coming in. And I don't understand how the NCAA is organized, but do they have the ability to override state legislation and say
Well,
no?
the NCAA has already threatened to possibly expel California schools from the NCAA.
Next part, do you see that maybe
No.
the NCAA going away, getting destroyed by this?
I don't think so. I think there has to be some sort of national governing board to control this. If you have every state with different rules, that's chaos. You know, some states can offer endorsements and other states can't, but maybe they offer this and they can't. It has to be regulated
This whole
somehow.
thing could very well go to the Supreme Court.
They're all Ivy Leaguers.
The Ivy League becomes the dominant conference.
You're right, all of a sudden, we have this conversation next year, and we can talk about Dartmouth winning it all.
Dartmouth.
Yeah.
On a completely unrelated subject, but current in sports. What do you think about this situation, which I didn't even know existed? I didn't realize that the NBA was so big in China.
Just read about it, yeah.
But China, being a communist dictatorship, arguably, the problem is that they are now angry about someone having who worked for an NBA team having criticized China's approach to Hong Kong and advocating for human rights, and now China is in fact banning that team from programming, showing those games in China. And apparently there's a massive amount of revenue that the NBA gets from China. I didn't even know it was
It's
broadcast.
an important part of their market.
Pardon?
It's an important part of their market.
Yeah. So what are those issues?
I don't know. I mean, you know, it is all about the money, obviously. Now, there are a lot of things that happen in China.
That's okay.
I think there are a lot of things that happen in China that we don't know about that probably aren't very good for the people of China. So, but there's money there, and so if there's money there, they're going to find it.
They got a lot of people with money.
$1 billion or more.
China.
To upgrade everybody, upspeed you, on Saturday or Sunday, maybe Friday, the general manager of the Houston Rockets did a tweet about the Hong Kong Chinese brouhaha. Am I right? Isn't that the basis of that story?
Yes.
And people are saying, why did the general manager of the Houston Rockets stick his nose in this thing? Because he felt compelled. And the media immediately grabbed a hold of his tweet and spread it out. I mean, Tony Kornheiser was all over it on Monday, which was yesterday, come to think of it. And other guys were all over it. Guys on Fox, I'm sure, were all over this story. Why would the general manager of the Houston Rockets stick his nose and say something, and then everybody picked it up? The sports guys picked it up. I don't know if the regular media picked it up, but I do know that the sports media got on top of it. Whoops.
Close.
Yeah, well, I pick it up. Anyway, so that's an interesting point. Say it would have been Louis Kupperman, tweeted it, it would have gone nowhere. But the fact that he was the general manager of the Houston Rockets, now it got some speed, it's got some stones to the story.
And he certainly has to know that the NBA has these agreements in place, so that it seems not very smart, not very wise of him to bite the hand that's feeding him. You know?
I'll tell you something. I'm surprised that the lawyers at the Rockets office didn't say, "You nuts."
Yeah.
Well, they may have.
Well, they probably did.
Yeah, they probably did.
But look at what Trump...
But it was done.
I mean, Trump
Sent.
tweets every day.
Right.
Take it down right
Trump's
away.
people have got everything that...
Anytime you ask why someone sticks their nose in, because we all do at some point, so, and it's just how tall is that pulpit that you stand on?
Well, we can all see all the things that sports entails into our lives. I don't know about you guys, but I think for the most part, sports are an important part of your life. It is a very important part of Anita's in our life. We enjoy watching it, we enjoy talking about it, we enjoy being able to go to live events when we were able to. It was a treat. When I was a young man, I'm going to tell you this story, 17 years old, I would go down up to Archibald Stadium and practice with those guys. I belonged there like I belonged at the UN, but I went there. And there was a guy by the name of Billy Gaber, and Jack Kiley, and Ed Miller. They would throw a pass to me, and I'd stick out my hands, but the ball was in my chest by the time I get my hands up there. So I understand how good they were, how really good they are. These kids that are playing, that you see in high school, and you see how good they are, and how fast they mature, and how fast they gather this ability to play. And it's going to go on forever. And so I think we're very lucky to be in a community that's exposed to all this, being exposed to Mark Larsons of this world that are bringing us this news. I mean, I feel sorry for somebody living in Iowa.
Especially the high school sport, that's really important. If anybody ever goes to a high school basketball game, for example, it's unbelievable the quality of play
That's fine.
exists. That's what I mean.
Yeah, they're not big, but they can jump, they can shoot. Oh yeah, the same thing goes with football. They can run, they can sometimes block. We're very gifted and lucky to be in a community that is a large degree sports oriented, sports available, and also with the streaming of the new television, you can get all kinds of games with streaming today. Serious. You can, and there's 82 different streaming venues. Until the other day, I didn't realize that YouTube had a streaming section. Your children will not watch cable. They're going to watch streaming. That's what's going to be.
Is this
a whole new subject.
Is the coach going to stick around?
It's all about money, right? Are we talking about money? Yeah, so.
I can't imagine. What two schools were in the headlines the other day?
Let's see. Who else?
Say UFC says to him, would you consider $7 million as a 6-year contract?
Yeah.
The words out of his mouth are just, let me speak to my lawyers. I mean, he's right. It's all about money. And the new home.
What about institutional loyalty?
Yeah.
Remember that?
These really are spoken.
Exactly.
No, it's unfortunately, it's come down to the money. And in the whole, everything has come down to the money, for the most part. Jimmy Boeheim is not going to move for another $2 million a year, or $2 million a year. No, that's not going to happen.
Right.
But Baber might.
Yeah. Yep. And who could win them?
Good point.
I would.
He's not
Huh?
held in by his contract?
There's always a buyout. So whoever wants him will pay the money for his buyout.
Yeah, they'll pay Syracuse University to buy it.
To buy out his contract.
Right.
I didn't know they could do that.
Yep.
Yeah, the tricky part of that is when you recruit these kids and they think you're going to
Yeah, that is true.
for at least the 4 years or 5 years that they're, and then when that doesn't happen, it's probably a tricky.
Which is another adverse selling point. So the alumni from Maryland hears that this kid wants to go to Syracuse, and the guy from Maryland says, coach at Syracuse is looking at other schools.
Yeah.
So it's a twist to that, too, to the selling point to the school.
Is he looking at other schools?
Are you breathing air?
No, I have.
Yeah. Well, I don't think he's looking as much as people are talking to him about it. And I'm not sure anybody's talked to him about it, but somebody at the Syracuse newspaper has got it in their head that there's a possibility that Baber might move. How do you get the story?
Yeah.
Better win a few more
When
games.
other people, yeah. When it's being speculated by major, news
The Maryland thing was a little bit of
organizations,
a-
I think it's newsworthy.
And when those stories go about, the guy who's got the original story, he goes to his the sports editor. And he says, this is what I heard. Sports Center District, there might be a story here.
Cross, come on.
Might be a story here.
We've got them.
And we got room. We got 6 inches there, 12 inches, that we gotta fill. Okay? Write the story. Let's see what happens.